looks like a bunch of people making games no one wants to play anyway are scared. Microsoft's mega deal worries small video game makers. So let me get this straight. Microsoft buying Activision to become only the third biggest gaming company behind Tencent and Sony is suddenly an issue? But Tencent buying everyone up wasn't an issue? But Sony buying everyone up wasn't an issue? Seriously? Now that Microsoft's doing it too, now it's a problem? Yeah, notice that the indies making good games people actually want to play aren't scared. I wonder why. When Tanya Short first pitched the idea for Boyfriend Dungeon, a computer game where the player's romantic partners are monster vanquishing weapons, publishers didn't seem overly interested. Why would you want a publisher anyway? That's like saying, here, give me money and you can have this idea. They all rejected it. They say the name wasn't interesting or that they didn't understand it, says Ms. Short, the director and chief executive of independent game studio Kid Fox Games. It was only after a growing buzz about the game and some initial funds via Kickstarter the game's platforms changed their tunes. Boyfriend Dungeon is now available on a variety of systems, including PC, Xbox, and Switch. But Ms. Short worries that quirky games like hers, designed by creatively independent studios, will have an even harder route to market in the future because the biggest corporate firms in gaming are expanding. So, in January, Microsoft said it plans to acquire Activision Blizzard, one of the world's largest game developers, at just less than $69 billion. It would be the biggest takeover in video game history and sees Microsoft gain franchises like Call of Duty and Warcraft. One of those is still valid, the other one's dead. Just weeks later, rival Sony announced a deal to buy game developer Bungie worth $3.6 billion. Yeah, God damn. Imagine buying Bungie this far after their prime. The Bungie that made Oni and Halo is long gone. Even Activision didn't want them. Though reportedly, Microsoft's deal will still have to satisfy scrutiny of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, whose chair, Lena Khan, has expressed some opposition to big tech monopolies. Okay, let me ask this again. How is Microsoft now a monopoly when even after the merger, they will still be smaller than Sony when it comes to gaming? Can anyone please explain that to me? Anybody? I'll wait. How are they a monopoly when they're still behind Sony, when they're still the third biggest in gaming? How is that a fucking monopoly? If they decide that that's a monopoly, then Sony has to be broken up. Ms. Short is one of a number of indie game developers who have told the Big Black Hawk that they are worried about what the deal could mean for the industry. Oh, man. And Microsoft insists it will continue to cater for small independent developers, but some of those developers are deeply concerned. For instance, that if the Microsoft-owned Game Pass subscription service increasingly becomes the only means through which people access games, smaller studios could be left competing for funding and promotion via that platform. Meanwhile, you got the only developers still worth a shit making hentai games for DL site, and they don't even show up on these big platforms. How fucking weird is that? What self-respecting indie still cares about these existing platforms? Now, definitely use them if you can. If you make a quote-unquote regular game that wouldn't require any censorship to be on Steam, by all means, release it on Steam. Or even if it needed censorship, censor it on Steam and put out a decensor patch. It's not hard. It could be viewed as a video game version of the problem that some artists say they face when with music streaming platform Spotify. Ms. Short also points out that currently indie studios already avoid launching their games in the run-up to Christmas, since so many larger AAA titles are released during that period. Think Call of Duty or FIFA. But with greater consolidation of large developers platforms such as Xbox and Game Pass calling more of the shots, things could get even trickier. I will say the opposite, okay? I actually think, like, imagine if all the AAA companies consolidated into either Microsoft or Sony. I actually think the opposite is going to happen. Because if they're all under the same umbrella, they're not going to want to compete with... look at what happened to Titanfall 2. It was sandwiched between two other major EA releases, and it got snuffed out. So once all these AAA developers have the same owner, they're actually going to release less games around Christmas time, in my opinion. because they're not going to want to compete with their own shit, with other departments in their own company. So they might actually end up spacing their releases out throughout the rest of the year, but they're probably not like, you're probably not going to see like 5 first-person shooters all dropping around Christmas time. Yeah, this Activision acquisition strikes fear in us because it makes it so much more obvious. Maybe they could dominate the rest of the year. And what do we do? She says. Well, look at it this way. They're releasing garbage. Even Call of Duty is on. I mean, it's still big, but it's declining. People are getting sick of lowest common denominator AAA shit. If you're worried about being drowned out, if that's how little faith you have in your own fucking product, then maybe you should just be drowned out. Who knows? Yura Zdanovic, founder and game director at Sad Cat Studios, leads a team of around 20 people who are working on a cyberpunk adventure game, Replaced. It features an artificial intelligence hunting for meaning in a dystopian urban landscape. When it's released later this year, the game will appear on Game Pass and some other platforms. Mr. Zdanovic praised Microshaft in terms of how the firm has worked with his studio so far, though he says he worries about whether there'll be enough support for indie developers in the future. Well, look at how Sony handled that. At first, they were pretty open. Then they got too big for their britches, and they sank a knife into everyone's back. Unless you are a massive AAA first-party PlayStation studio, they don't care about you. While Game Pass currently offers some indie titles among the 500 or so games available on the service, there aren't that many of them, according to Piers Harding Rolls, an analyst at Ampere Analysis. The service is just getting started for now. They're definitely going to want to sweeten the deal with a lot more AAA games, but eventually they're going to want more indie games, okay? It's going to happen. He says it's hard to predict what would happen if gamers were to increasingly sign up to Game Pass or similar services in the future and move entirely away from buying games individually. At that point, the game industry deserves to die. If games go streaming or live service only, they deserve to die. Like, that's the point where I check out of the industry. Conceivably, indie games outside these services might lose engagement as subscribers focus most of their attention on games they can access for free within the service, he adds. Yeah, go ahead, guys. Keep fighting for access to the mainstream services while we keep boosting alternatives like DL Site. Yeah, it's a concern because indie studios are currently in a race to the bottom in terms of revenue, says Jake Simpson of TMB Studios, a seasoned developer who has worked with Microshaft and Activision, among others. According to VG Insights, more than half of the indie games on Steam distribution service never made more than $4,000. Yeah. Meanwhile, our good friends at Lewd Gamer release Orc Massage, and I actually know how many they sold. And I don't think I'm at liberty to discuss this since that was an internal discussion, but let's just say that so far, that game has sold more units than the amount of money the average indie game makes. And keep in mind, it's definitely a little bit more than $1 per unit. You can make really good money, even on indie games, if you actually make something people fucking like. If you actually make something people want. See, indie games, they tend to fall into two categories. They're either trying to copy AAA and giving you a lesser experience, or they just get too fucking artsy. Just because your game is unique and different doesn't make it fucking good. Those are the two extremes a lot of indie games seem to fall in. And then actually also, no, never mind. Here's a third one. The bandwagon jumpers. Like, oh, look, pixel art is all the rage right now. Let's just make some shitty pixel art game and maybe we can capitalize on the fad. Like that type of stuff. People are prepared to spend thousands of dollars on a telephone and then get very offended when you ask them to pay $5 for a game, says Simpson, who praised the innovation and creativity of many small developers. Well, if you're on mobile, they expect free. Yeah, free to play, man. AI researcher and game designer Mike Cook at Queen Mary University of London says there's an overcrowding problem. That means it's hard for good games to find their audience. Very small developers in particular are feeling that pressure. Yes. Isn't this exactly what I've been saying for fucking years? I've mentioned how many times that there are literally hundreds of indie games being released on Steam per day. Unless you do something to stand out, or you have a marketing presence, like you've built up a platform somewhere else, you're gonna be drowned out. The dream of individual people making games and publishing them has become a lot harder over the last few years, says Dr. Cook. That's bullshit, okay? This is fucking bullshit. And let me explain. Right now, all these fucking indie devs are bitching that there's an overcrowding problem. There's there's too much competition. I can't get noticed. You know what they were bitching about before? Oh my God, Steam's gatekeeping me off the platform. Oh, it's so hard to be approved for these platforms. Like, there's literally no way to win. They either bitch that there's too much competition and not enough quality control, or there's too much quality control. And it's too hard to get on the platform. That's what they were bitching about a few years ago. Am I the only one that remembers that? God damn. It's possible to self-publish Xbox games via Microsoft's ID at Xbox scheme. Great. Now, the company's Sarah Bond, corporate VP of Xbox Gaming Ecosystem Organization, argues that Game Pass will, if anything, benefit indie developers by introducing them to new and unfamiliar types of games. Probably. I mean, there's absolutely a chance that someone's going to be just scrolling through Game Pass looking for something to play, and they'll see your game. An example, she says that the people who tried indie puzzle game Human Fall Flat on Game Pass, 60% never played a puzzle game before, and that 40% of those people went on to buy a different puzzle game outside of Game Pass. That's actually a pretty good point. We are continuing to invest with indie developers, and we're continuing to do so as the service grows, Ms. Bond said in an interview with Big Black Cock, though she declined to discuss specifics. No, it will not make us a monopoly, she adds, referring to the planned deal with Activision. Yeah, they're still the third biggest. Anissa Sanusi, video game user interface designer, says news of the Microsoft Activision deal has left indie studios on guard. She says, "Oh no." Meanwhile, you have future indie game studios salivating at this because I think this is great. Personally, I think this is absolutely fucking great. If all of the competition consolidates into one or two entities, that'll make them easier to crush. Why not? Let's do it. Now, she says she is concerned that Microsoft's acquisition of game companies could lead to an overall decline in competition within the industry. Where was this concern when Sony was buying up studios for the past few years? Do you realize that Microsoft doing this is literally a response to Sony having been doing this for years? Where was this concern when they did it? It's important that indie developers survive, she adds, not just for creative diversity, but because smart companies often provide less pressurized environments for artists, writers, and programs to get involved with the business of making games. Indies will survive. There will just be a little bit of natural selection. Those who are worthy of survival will be fine. Now, we know the money's there. We know it's a lucrative business, she says, yet we still, as indie developers, are kind of clawing our way. Just like with comics. You got to make your own, you got to build up your own platform and get your own audience elsewhere first before you jump in. Because otherwise, yeah, it's going to fucking suck.